Hey guys, bringing another video. This time we're going to be looking at repairing a kicker 10-inch. This is the CompRT. These are their low profile subwoofers. They tend to usually include them in their loaded enclosures. I believe they have them in an 8, 10, and 12-inch combination in different configurations, whether it's for truck boxes or flat boxes for back of the trunks, but they usually combine these with a passive radiator of equivalent size. So in this particular case, this came out of a box that had a 10-inch passive radiator. For those that don't know passive radiators, they act as a port. And the advantages of using a passive radiator is usually they're best utilized in small enclosures. That is because usually most ported boxes will need a lot more volume or cubic feet for the subwoofer to flourish in a ported box. So what Kicker has done, excellent job really, put these in much smaller enclosures and combine them with a passive radiator. And again, the port, acting as a port, does bring down should I say, complements with some of those lower end frequency. So these tend to sound really, really good. They're great subwoofers, very popular, very, very popular, but I will say I see a lot of these damaged. And I don't think it's specifically related to quality control or manufacturing. It's just that they sound great at high volumes and most people just push them beyond their limits and they end up burning them up. So too much current through the voice coil, burn up the wires or the insulation, things get loose and it locks up. So this one got burned pretty bad. You can see, can't even push it in there. So what I'm gonna do is go through the normal process of disassembling this and replace both the voice coil. And upon inspection of this particular subwoofer, I noticed that even the spider was burnt up. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you kind of the initial disassembly. Again, I like to use my favorite tools. My 1/2-inch wood chisel is great. Be able to sharpen up the edge to really get under the various adhesives that holds both the surround as well as the spider. You can also utilize this to remove the dust cap here. I also have my miniature little pry bar. This is very convenient. I highly recommend you guys have these around for many uses, not just subwoofers, but if you disassemble a lot of plastic accessory tips like door panels or door trim or anything like that in vehicles, very, very, very useful. And I think I have a few of these. This one's hyper tough, so Walmart's best, right? Got that. And of course, my handy little pocket blade. This is very convenient. Always have extra blades, etc. And so using that, I went ahead and did some of the preliminary disassembly, but I wanted to kind of walk you through it. And then I will also highlight all of the replacement parts that were required for this. So the first one is going to be using my pry tool. And what I did is carefully go around the center dust cap to pry it up carefully without either bending the plastic around or anything like that. And this is just uses adhesive to hold it in place. So eventually this will just pop off and you can see just adhesive that's really holding it in place, and it's almost kind of press fit, but it's adhesive on the back and you can easily pry it off. So there you go. You kind of see now the voice coil and the center motor portion, which is often referred to as the yoke. As soon as I open up, in fact, you can see some carbon deposits there from the overheating and the burning up. Okay, the next step I did is these kickers have a plastic trim ring. Again, this is also held down by epoxy. As you can see, it usually aligns up with all the holes and mounting. So I was able to use same pry bar and the combination of my wood chisel to kind of pop this off. And you can see here, again, a little bit of the same adhesive that's used, that rubberized E6000 equivalent or whatever they use, silicone, was used to hold it in place, to really more for aesthetics than anything, as that was holding the surround in place. The next thing is I use my handy chisel to go ahead and start peeling off the rubber surround. I love these subwoofers, similar to the JBL in one of my previous videos, that they use this rubberized surround instead of foam. It's a lot more robust, it's durable, you're not going to have any dry rot, what is often referred to as the stuff on foam. If you leave it in your vehicle, hot, cold temperatures, eventually it just kind of weakens, and during operation it'll fall apart and disintegrate. So like the rubber stuff, plus it makes it much easier to remove the surround. So I was able to kind of find an opening under here and work my way around it, peeling very carefully without ripping the surround, and was able to completely get the surround off. And you can see just a very thin layer of that adhesive in place that was holding it. With the combination of this trim ring, it really held it on fine. So it wasn't bad manufacture or anything like that. So overall, well-built subwoofer. Okay, once I did that, I peeled this surround back and actually used some tape to hold it in place. I did attempt to use my wood chisel to remove the spider, but similar to one of my other speakers, it was just really on there, and it's very thin layer of epoxy, so it was very hard to remove. So I got my handy little pocket knife, and I went ahead and I used that to cut the surround. So I cut as close as I can to the edge, and you can see it's already kind of been removed down there with that yellow spider. As close as I can, that way I can maintain overall integrity when I do put it back on there again. But as I did that, and I worked all the way around, all the way around, all the way around. Again, don't be scared, just use care, right? Again, it's an electronic component. It's the same materials they build everything else, rubber, plastic, metal, so nothing exotic here. As I did that, I went ahead and desoldered the tinsel leads. The tinsel leads is what allows the voice coil leads to attach to the external terminals, which are these spring-loaded terminals here. So I went ahead and desoldered those, so you can see that they're slightly desoldered. And that what that does, after removing the surround, after removing the spider, and desoldering the tinsel leads, basically you should be able to pull this thing out, and that's exactly what we can do here. So now let me give you a closer look of what this looks like, if it'll come out. All right. All right, look how bad this is. This was, oh boy, look at this. So you can definitely tell it shorted out a lot of current, which created a lot of heat just over the tinsel leads themselves and burned up the entire spider. You can see the voice coil completely burnt up. It's supposed to be a copper voice coil. I don't think Kicker uses the aluminum with the black insulation, and they could, but this looks like it was just overcurrent, and you can see the windings are already coming apart, and it locked up in there. So bad voice coil. You can see the bubbling in there from all the heat around the Kapton. Kapton, very high temperature melting point, so it will just heat up. Great insulator, actually. Other side looks pretty good. So it looks like just one side. This is a dual 4-ohm voice coil. And here's the spider. And so now the next step is going to be to go ahead and carefully remove the spider out of the way. That way I have a little bit more room to work. So what I will do is I'll just cut as close as I can and take all my measurements necessary to ensure I get a proper fit for the new one. Dun, 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 foreshadowing. And then I will start taking out the old voice coil. And again, before I do that, I always take my handy little measurements of the outer diameter of the voice coil, right? The outer diameter, the inner diameter of the voice coil. I look at the height of the winding, right? And then I also, one of the more important things, I look at the height of where it sits. So from the very top right down to the triple ring. Why do I do that? I do that as to ensure that when I do put the new voice coil in, that I seat it properly, right? You don't want to go too far in or leave it too far out, because you'll either bottom out or you just won't get the same performance. So might as well be consistent. So that will be the next step. But again, I'll reiterate, it's important to take all the measurements that you can, and also it helps with pictures, right? In case you mess something up, you can go back and figure out where it is. But I'll cut this around carefully. One thing I will ensure that I do is also figure out where the tinsel leads terminate and attach to the voice coil. I want to try to maintain that connection. It looks like it's somewhere in between that top cone area and the bottom cone area, and it looks like it's epoxied on, but we'll get it situated. You can see the tinsel leads all the way in there. I might be able just to leverage the very tip of those and solder onto them so I don't have to dig in between these two layers, which is, you know, path of least resistance. Make it easy as possible. The KISS approach, keep it simple, stupid. Or to be politically correct in the work environment, keep it simple, Sam. Anyways, tangent again. Pretty straightforward. You can see now how bad it burnt up. Look at all this carbon deposit around here on the motor. Got pretty hot, which means someone just let it play for a really long time, and that's what happens, right? Current heats up wire, wire disintegrates, shorts, creates carbon, all that fun stuff. So part of the measurement as well is you want to make sure you have good accurate measurement of the gap. And so you can do that by looking at the outer diameter of the center pole or the yoke, and here's the top plate. So usually folks like Lord of Bass or Robot Underground or FixMySpeakers.com, they'll ask you about outer plate diameter, inner plate diameter. So you just want to know, take measurements out here, take measurements on here. So now you have the inner diameter, outer diameter of the gap. You've got the measurements for the voice coil because you want to ensure that it fits properly, right? But part of it, again, in a cleanup process, I will take my Dremel tool and some IC-Propol and really clean around here, clean it up, remove carbon deposits. Carbon is conductive. You don't want to leave deposits everywhere because it can also short out just being there, even though it may be deceiving, but it's very, very conductive. And that's it. And so I will take a shot, and the next attempt is to get this thing up and running and see what we can do with it. Again, really good subwoofers, very popular. These RT series are made to go in very small enclosures. They're shallow, so they have small mounting depth. So very popular for trucks that don't have a lot of space, for smaller vehicles, but their output is great, very clean. Very good bass, and again, that's why you probably see so many of them damaged. People just push them further than they can go at these higher volumes just because they sound so good. As I did the measurements, it's important to note that I took all the maximum dimensions of the spider itself, so the outer diameter, inner diameter, and I matched it with one that is of similar. So this came from Lord of Bass. They have many options for different voice coils. And excuse me one second. So that is hopefully going to be a drop-in replacement that allows me to put in a new spider to this assembly. So that's going to be a big task, obviously cleaning off the old one and getting that prepped and adhered to. The next part is after I took all the measurements for the voice coil and best approximations, I was able to match it up with another voice coil. So copper 4-layer dual voice coil. Still opted for the dual 4 ohm to be consistent. So very similar size dimensions. The only thing, I believe the windings, no, they were right on par. So not much difference in the overall winding thickness. So pretty good match, and I am looking forward to kind of starting this process and walking you guys through it. If you've seen my previous videos, I did get various adapters to center the voice coil to the motor when it's ready. I have not used this yet, but I've used its bigger brother, and I didn't have very good success. So I will probably not use this and end up using my good old trusty spacers, which is made out of this thick, already preformed cardboard coming from a circular tube. These work great. They've been reliable forever, equal spacing around, and we'll walk through that whole process as well. But I have both options here. So again, new spider, new voice coil, centering, and really the tools, disassembly, were 3 major tools here and a little bit of TLC in caressing this and taking it apart carefully without ripping anything that wasn't already damaged. And then hopefully we can put it all back together and get it working. So stay tuned, and I will put up another video. Thank you all. Hopefully you guys enjoy, subscribe, like, and I will continue to make more content. Thank you. Okay, so made some great headway removing the old spider and the burnt up old voice coil. You can see it's just kind of completely disintegrated and fell apart when I pulled that out. And here's a closer look of how bad the spider was, just really burnt it up. Again, it was probably a short, just running all that current right through those wires, which caused that to burn up. So got that off and started kind of putting the new voice coil in place, but I wanted to kind of walk through the step to show that little finer details. So you can see here's where the spider was attached. I cut as close as I can right to the very edge where it's still kind of epoxied. And I'll be able to use this as the surface. I can grind it off, but again, it's already pretty perforated, so it's gonna actually be an excellent surface to apply the new spider to, as that epoxy really holds good in place. Then I removed the voice coil carefully, the old one, just to make sure that I maintain the same diameter. So I'm going to carefully flip this over. And I went ahead and set in place the new voice coil. Again, aluminum former, which is the basic inner diameter material with a slit in the middle. And then it's got 4-layer copper windings on there. This is a dual, I believe 2 ohm. I forgot if it was dual 2 ohm or 4 ohm. But one of the things I did, and it's just sitting in place so you can kind of see where that triple ring kind of area is, right at the very bottom of the voice coil. I'll have to center it, but as I do that, I want to point out one thing. You can see these 4 leads. This is the voice coil, dual voice coil. Here's one for one side, here's the other for one side. If I turn it this way, here they are as well. So what I did, I also removed the entire tinsel leads. I really like how Kicker kind of was able to support the previous tinsel leads coming from their voice coil down to the spider. And what they had done, they've actually drilled, and it's very hard to see here, but they drilled right above the triple ring. And so after I pulled the old tinsel lead out, I actually cleaned it up a little bit and drilled my own holes, very tiny holes with a little Dremel tool and the bits that I use for board routing. So they're very fine. You can pick them up at Harbor Freight or on Amazon. They're a very fine bit, and I apologize I don't have the size. But let me see if I can zoom in here. This is probably one of the larger ones because that was the first one I drilled. And then if I move over to the other one, again, not too bad. And what I'll do once I secure the voice coil in place, I'll go ahead and fill those with epoxy, and then I'll have those leads come out, and eventually I will solder them to the tinsel leads placed on the spider. So pretty important step. Just again, a little TLC. Oh, if you see here, you'll see my Sharpie marking. This is very important to know where it's going to touch the base of that. As I mentioned in all of my videos for repairs, as you're disassembling, always take measurements. So in this particular case here, this is my voice coil. This is the height winding of the voice coil. This is the overall height of the voice coil. This is the inner diameter of the voice coil, outer diameter of the previous one that I took out, right? Again, this is before removing, modifying, and this allows me to go order one that is comparable. But more importantly, I also wanted to show this, and I excuse my handwriting as I was probably writing on my workbench here. This is exposed. So what I mean by exposed is the total height from the bottom of the voice coil to the bottom of the triple ring. That is the exposed, because these voice coils and their formers vary in height. You can get them very long, very short. So what I want to do is make sure I get the exact dimension of what it's going to be from the bottom of the voice coil right to the triple ring. And that's where I marked it with a Sharpie. And I believe that was that 45.6 millimeters. And so you can barely kind of see it in here, but here it is. And what I'll do is when I center it, I'll make sure that that is perfectly flush with this line to my best ability. That way, when I do install it, there's no concern about it being too tall where it's going to bottom out in the bottom of the motor, or too short where you'll probably lose a lot of performance. So overall, coming along just fine. I haven't been able to really work on this as much, but this probably took me the last 30 minutes or so, to be honest with you. And so the next step is making sure I get this on a flat surface, level it, make sure it's very, very, very centered. And then I will go ahead and put 5-minute epoxy all around the triple ring area here to hold the voice coil in place. And I will not mess with it for about 24 hours, even though the 5-minute epoxy allows working, I think working time within, I don't know, a few minutes, 5 minutes. I will let it completely cure before I go back and mess with either filling up the holes where I drilled for this voice coil leads, or the new spider that I'll be placing on here, which will be the next major step. And once I put the spider on here, I'll go ahead and solder the tinsel leads of the voice coils, or the tinsel leads that are threaded on the spider itself, and get that situated, and we're almost there. So pretty easy fix. Again, anything's repairable. So stay tuned, and let's get to the next part.